What's up, everybody? Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're at. It's your boy Reco Suave. I just wanted to get on and talk about some history, especially with everything that's going on in our nation today with ICE raids, and then obviously we have the protests that are going on against ICE, anti-ICE or anti-immigration protests. And just the division that's going on even with our own people. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit. My channel is about ancient history. My channel is about history. So I wanted to talk about a little bit about history because I continuously hear, I want to correct something real quick, because one is I'm continuously hearing, why are the Mexican flags being flown without the American flag? Why is it being flown in this country and this and that? I'll give you two reasons. Here's one reason. One reason why is because all of this land formerly belonged to Mexico. And I'm getting ready to talk about this because earlier this morning, I wrote a short little paper and I'm going to read it to you guys. Anyways, I'm going to talk about this in the paper, but I just wanted to say, the Treaty of Hidalgo was signed on February 2nd of 1848. And the treaty included certain rights that Mexicans who would be still in these lands after the new borders were drawn were supposed to receive. With them not receiving those rights, and in fact being lynched in mass, being deported in mass, literally lynched. There was like 400 out of every 100,000 people that were being lynched. Literally, that equals to thousands of Mexicans that were lynched after 1848. So all of this land used to belong to Mexico. And when the treaty is not honored, you have a violated treaty. So that's something that you have people of Mexican American descent looking at. Not only that, but the American flag is also being flown in conjunction with the Mexican flag. If you've been at any of the protests, if you've watched any of the lives from people who are actually on the ground at the protests, you would see the American flag being flown in conjunction with the Mexican flag, and not just the Mexican flag or the Venezuelan flag or the Peruvian flag, etc., Palestinian flag being flown just singularly. Yeah, you see them being flown singularly too, but at the same time, they are still being flown in conjunction with the American flag. Now, if we're going to make a comparison, not to speak radically, but if we're going to make a comparison, then why is it not a problem when you have Proud Boys marching through town with Nazi flags and Confederate flags? The Confederate flag is literally a treasonous flag, but it's okay to be flown, right? I'm just being real, just facing the facts. I've been quiet over the past, all of this erupted about a week ago. So I've been quiet and I've just been watching what's going on. But, silence is being complicit. But at the same time, I see a bigger and broader picture, especially with geopolitics. And I'm going to get into that. But first, I wanted to deal with history. So I want to talk about a little bit of history. And I'm going to start with Operation Wetback. I'm just going to read you this paper that I wrote earlier today with the help of various sources like Wikipedia.com. Right? Everybody knows Wikipedia. So I'm going to keep on saying this too, probably throughout the video. Don't argue with me, argue with the experts. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to see a whole bunch of comments and all of that, that are negative. So we'll see. Anyways, Operation Wetback, initiated in 1954 by the U.S. Immigration Naturalization Service, sought to address the growing concerns about immigration from Mexico during the post-World War II era. This operation aimed to deport undocumented Mexican immigrants in mass and reflected a broader narrative of the U.S. government's fluctuating policies on immigration. The context of Operation Wetback is deeply intertwined with the Bracero program, which was established in 1942 to meet labor shortages in agriculture and other sectors during World War II. The Bracero program allowed for the legal entry of Mexican laborers under temporary work contracts and sometimes permanent citizenship, highlighting the U.S. reliance on Mexican labor for economic stability. But then you had Operation Wetback right after that saying, forget what we told you, go back home, right? This historical backdrop is further complicated by the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Remember, I told you this was in my paper. Signed in 1848, which ended the Mexican-American War. Remember, this wasn't just signed because he wanted to. One, America and their coalition of forces outnumbered the Mexican forces. Let's just be real about that. We were outnumbered. One. Two, it was done at the point of a sword. Three, I could get into the person who got this treaty signed. The only reason why this dude wasn't even supposed to be in Mexico, or wasn't even Mexico at the time. I'm going to keep it real. It was Mexico at the time. It wasn't even supposed to be in Mexico. He had been recalled by the president. The president told him come back to the White House, and he refused the order. And then he ended up getting the treaty signed. So, I'm going to make a whole different video about that just to prove my point. Anyways, the treaty of this historical backdrop is further complicated by the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo signed in 1848, which ended the Mexican-American War and resulted in the U.S. acquisition, or I'll get into that in another video, of a significant portion of Mexican territory. The treaty not only established the current borders between the U.S. and Mexico, but also guaranteed certain rights and protections to the Mexican residents living in the newly acquired territories, including land rights and citizenship. However, the subsequent failure to uphold these rights often led to discrimination, and not often, it did. Not just often, it was always led to discrimination and marginalization of Mexican Americans, setting a precedent for their treatment and further immigration policies, as we're seeing today, right? Additionally, the Repatriation Act of the 1930s, which led forced repatriation of Mexican nationals and Mexican Americans during the Great Depression, provides further historical context for understanding U.S. attitudes towards Mexican immigrants. The Repatriation Act aimed to reduce unemployment by sending Mexican Americans back to Mexico. That's what's going on right now, right? Reduce unemployment, boost the economy, send everybody. That's what we're seeing, right? Often without due process, the same thing, and affected the U.S. citizens of Mexican descent. This earlier movement set a precedent on how the U.S. government would approach immigration and repatriation, influencing the aggressive tactics seen in Operation Wetback and the scene today. So when you're saying, why are Mexicans on the streets doing all of these? Man, this has been a history of it's been going on since 1848. Longer than 1848. But additionally, it's been going on since 1848. It's been going on since 1848. So Operation Wetback, it got over 1.1 million individuals estimated, but it also raised questions of the effectiveness of deportation as a solution to labor needs. None of that stuff even really matters, because what we're going to today is ultimately these same tactics that have been used throughout time are being used by ICE and HSI, Homeland Security, and their fellow law enforcement agencies, the police, ETC, the military. These racially motivated mass deportations are nothing new to the Mexican people and other marginalized communities that have suffered because of immigration laws and tactics in America. This has been going on for well over 100 years. So I see a lot of conflict between even our own people, and it has to do with not hating the person, but we don't hate our people. I'm not one who hates my people. I'm trying to educate you so you can understand which side of history you're going to end up being on. The world is changing. Now let's go into geopolitics. What's going on in geopolitics? We have a lot going on in geopolitics. We have immigration, anti-immigration protests going on in Ireland right now. That's not on the news. Bet you guys didn't even know about that. It's going on all over Ireland right now. You have Paris up in arms right now. That's not on the news either. You also have 10,000 North Africans marching down on Gaza right now. You don't see that on the news either. What you do see on the news is something everybody should be paying attention to, and that is, what's going on in the Middle East. Pay attention. Pay close attention, because at this point in time, it doesn't really matter what your political beliefs are. And I've been saying this for a long time. At this point, it doesn't really matter what your political beliefs are. I hope that you are saving up food and water. I hope that you're saving up emergency medical supplies. And I hope that you're seeing where we are at in time. And again, I'm not trying to incite anything, and I don't want to speak radically. I want to speak directly to the issues and to how my opinion of these issues are. So my opinion of what we're seeing, and this is something that a lot of people have heard me say before, and I don't believe that marches work. I don't believe that protests work. If they did, we wouldn't still be dealing with the same thing that we've been dealing with that I just talked about for over 100 years. Politics are corrupt, you know. It takes getting one of our own voted in. That's what it takes. That's what it takes for change. Whether you believe it or not, we have to make, and we have so many of our people that want to become everything but politicians. If we have more politicians, more lawyers, more judges, if we have more people getting involved in politics, maybe we'd be seeing a different America right now instead of the same old thing that we've been seeing since 1848. Economy and community and economy. We have the biggest economy in America, but we fight each other like crazy. And it does, and I say us because I want to include everybody. I don't want to just say, oh, it's only just Mexicans, because Mexicans aren't the only people who are going through marginalized problems. I'll just put it like that. I have to be careful about the things that I say publicly and privately, really. You know, we all should be careful about the things that we say publicly and privately, but we shouldn't be silent either. And that's just being real. We shouldn't be silent either. But at the same time, I don't believe that marches work. I don't believe protests work. And we're watching the proof of it, because every single time they'll give us a little bit of something and then it goes back to the same thing. We'll be cool for 10 years. And then it's back to, okay, immigration again, big old mass deportations again. And it's always aimed towards people of Mexican descent, predominantly. I'm not taking nothing away from any other any other people who are dealing with immigration. You know, we have to decolonize our minds and pay attention. Pay attention. The world is changing. The world is changing, and you need to change with it. We're watching the Euro West fall right now, and the global South is being set to take over. That's what we're watching. We're watching the end of empire. Which side of history do you want to fall on? Real talk. And it's only going to get worse before it gets better. And, you know, I had a few people in my inbox saying they wanted me to speak on the things that are going on, and I'm speaking on it. But again, you're not going to like the things that I have to say. I've spent the better part of 10 years researching world history and politics. And I'm not saying I know everything, but I know enough to know that we're in the end of an era right now, in the beginning of a new era. And it's up to you to decide whether you want to be on the right side of history or not. It really doesn't even matter about your opinions anymore. It doesn't really matter about your political views. None of that. And I'm not trying to be mean. None of that matters, because what it is what it is. And what it is we're looking at the beginning of World War III. Go get on YouTube. Go get anywhere. Go listen to the experts. Scott Ritter, he's an expert. Go listen to Scott Ritter. He's been in the government. He oversaw a lot of these things that has gone on. Pay attention to world politics. Pay attention to geopolitics. Pay attention to what's going on in the world so you can better understand the state of our world in general. The entire world, the citizens of the entire world are speaking back whether the governments want to or not. So which side of history do you want to be on? And I'm going to keep on saying that. Which side of history you want to be on? And again, don't argue with me. Go argue with the experts. Literally, go argue with the experts. And with that, you know, I get riled up because a lot of this stuff hits home. It hits home with me. I have friends who are on the ground right now. I got people who are literally. And so it hits home with me. I have people who have been snatched up. So it's really close. I think all of us have had people that we know who have been affected in some way or another. So it hits close to home, and being on a public platform, I want to make sure that I'm keeping my words, that I articulate my speech. And I don't want to speak radically, and I don't want to speak out against anybody's feelings. I'm not here to disrespect anybody or anything like that. But when it comes down to it, what's happening is going to continue happening, and it's only going to get worse. And that's my 100% opinion. And my advice for those who may be worried is make sure you have enough food and water. Make sure you have enough medical supplies. Learn your surroundings, learn the land, the layout of the land, learn how to survive off the land, your medical, for penicillin, find natural penicillin, find what you need to find, and hunker down. Try to get away from the most populated areas, because those areas are going to be hit hard and fast, and those areas are going to be the first ones hit. In my opinion, and again, I'm not trying to incite panic. It's the state of the world. Look at what's going on. That's all I got to say. Pay attention to what's going on. Pay attention to what's going on. And with that, I just want to wish everybody a happy No King's Day. If you're out there at the protest, please stay peaceful. If you see people inciting violence, step in, tell them to stop. That's not what it's about. We're not trying to incite any violence. And again, like I said, I'm not one who is for protest. I'm not one who's for rallies and marching. I think we've been doing it for far too long with far little results. And I believe that there's other ways, legal ways of doing things. So with that, I just want to say love and peace and love. And I hope that everybody has a beautiful Saturday. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. Have a good one.